Okay, so with that we'll get started. Thank you all for coming and welcome to tonight's motion of this House believes that Fine Gael's time in government is up. Now, Fine Gael are a self-described party of the Progressive Centre, and part of the theme of tonight's debate is the fact that they have been in government since 2011. That equates to 13 years, and for a democracy that is quite a long time. They've been in power ever since 2011, ever since Enda Kenny formed a coalition with Labour. This government's term was subjected to a bailout from the EU and the IMF. The government thus had to implement austerity measures and financial reforms. However, by 2013, Ireland had exited this recession and entered into a period of economic growth. Fine Gael oversaw the legalisation of same-sex marriage in 2015, and in 2016 formed a minority government with the support of independents. Enda Kenny's retirement in 2017 saw Leo Varadkar become leader of the party, and thus, of course, Taoisigh. The late 2010s saw Fine Gael oversee the legalisation of abortion, as well as being Ireland's representative party at Brexit negotiations, which led, of course, to the Northern Ireland Protocol. In 2020, against the backdrop of a recently held election, Leo Varadkar led the country's public health response to the pandemic and implemented economic support measures. By June of this year, they had entered into a historic coalition with Fianna Fáil and the Greens. Well, the Greens aren't that relevant in this case. And this marked an end of the rift with the Civil War parties. In December 2022, having served 2.5 years as Taoisigh, Leo Varadkar returned to the office of Taoisigh, where he served until March of this year, when he announced that he would be retiring. Simon Harris won the leadership contest unopposed and has been our Taoisigh since. Fine Gael has seen a boost in popularity and did relatively well in the European and local elections in June. And Simon Harris is seen to have brought a bounce to the party. This brings us to today, with an election merely weeks away, some people say. And Fine Gael is facing a large personnel overhaul. 15 of their currently sitting 35 TDs will be retiring. And essentially, in July, we saw the UK election, where the Conservative Party, after being in government for 14 years, faced an absolute wipeout. Now, while this is unlikely for Fine Gael, it does raise the question over whether it is good for a democracy having one party being in power for so long. So, with that said, I would like to invite the proposition to propose the motion that Fine Gael's time in government is up. Our first speaker is Deputy Peadar Tóibín. He is the TD from Meath West. Hailing from Navan, he gained a degree in economics and politics in UCD. Having been a member of Fianna Fáil during his time in college, in 1998 he joined Sinn Féin, for whom he served as a councillor during the mid-2000s. In November 2018, however, facing suspension from Sinn Féin for voting against the legalisation of abortion, he resigned from the party. In January 2019, he founded Ahearne, a party focusing on United Ireland, but with left-wing economics and a more socially conservative outlook. Deputy Tóibín remains a distinctive voice in Irish politics, most notably recently during the era of COVID, when he represented the only party opposed to the severity of Ireland's lockdown policy. And with that said, I will now welcome Deputy Tóibín to the stage.
Díomh Corja, Míle buíochas as an deis fé anseo inniu. I was going to start off my speech with those delighted comrades to attend the Friends of Russia Society here in DCU, but obviously that's the wrong speech for today. So listen, my point here is, at the very start, is that Ireland is a great country. We have a great people who are full of opportunity and promise. We are a gregarious nation. We are a common sense nation. We are a hard-working nation, and we are an intelligent nation. And we should be a country of so much opportunity and so much development within our society. But if you look around, that's not the reality for many of us at the moment. And if you look at a young couple starting out in life currently, they are less likely to be able to buy a home, even less likely to be able to rent a home. In reality, they're more likely to have to postpone having a family. They are more likely to have to move to the Dublin region to be able to work. They're more likely to spend 2 or 3 hours commuting on a daily basis to try and get to work. They're actually more likely than 20 years ago to have to emigrate to be able to do the job that they want. And they are more likely to spend time on a hospital waiting list than 20 years ago. They're more likely to go into overcrowding in an A&E 20 years ago. They are more likely to suffer from the complete grinding to a halt of the systems that should be part of a functioning liberal democracy in this country. And why is that? Now, there are a number of different components in relation to that, but I have no doubt that it is in significant parts down to the policies that Fine Gael have taken over the last 13 years. And I'll go through briefly why I think it's time, absolutely, that Fine Gael no longer are in government. So, a couple of examples. Leo Varadkar promised that by 2020, that's the National Children's Hospital will be built for €700,000, except if an asteroid hits the planet. And here we are in 2024. There's no chance of it being fully complete for another 2 or 3 years. And it's at €2.25 billion at the moment. That's incredible. We have spent €300 million on Metro North, and a shovel has not been put into the ground. €22 million was spent on ventilators that didn't work during COVID, and the government is spending €100,000 keeping them in a shed somewhere so that they keep nice and dry. The governments were involved in the purchase of 120 electric buses that never moved an inch for a year and a half because somebody forgot to apply for the planning permission for the electric chargers to work on those buses. We have a situation where the government spent €350,000 on a Gucci bicycle shed in Leinster House. That is an absolute travesty. €1.4 million on a security shed that's the same size as a mobile home in this country. And €9 million for pouches for mobile phones in schools. €9 million for what are really little sleeping bags for mobile phones while children are in school. Now, sometimes I think that the government are being advised by squirrels when it comes to the decisions that they make because they are so absolutely crazy. And that's one of the big difficulties that Fine Gael have. I believe that many of them are career politicians, have been, completely cosseted in government for so long that they have no understanding of the realities of people's lives anymore. No understanding what it means to actually try to earn a living, try to get a house to live in, and try to get a job for the family as well. So the big issue here is that public services and infrastructure are grinding to a halt in this country. Now, that has a number of impacts on you. The first impact is they are incinerating your hard-earned money. They are having a bonfire on all of these infrastructural projects of your money. Now, your money is not easy to come by. You work hard to achieve your money. Those taxes should be productive to you in terms of the services that you need. But this government is incinerating that money. The second issue is that public service delivery and infrastructure are grinding to a halt. Now, that has a radical influence in relation to you because it means that the things that you need are simply not there when you need them. And that's a really, really important issue. And I'll give you an example of those. So right now there are 4,000 empty homes, empty local authority homes in Ireland. It takes 8 months on average for those local authority homes to be flipped and rented out to a new family that needs them. That's enough homes, believe it or not, to actually accommodate everybody who is in homeless accommodation at the moment. If you contrast to the private sector currently, it takes 3 weeks for private sector rental accommodation to be turned around and re-rented. Why? Because somebody who owns a home for rent is not going to be able to sit on it for 8 months and not have it rented out. You have 90,000 empty private homes in the country. Now, having empty private homes in a housing crisis is like shipping food off in the middle of a famine. It's absolutely wrong. But the government has come up with a solution. They are providing refurbishment grants for those homes. They're delivering 4 of those refurbishment grants every month. That will mean in 1,250 years, those houses will be back into use at this pace of change. Now, how can anybody say to us that that is a government responding with the urgency that is necessary in terms of the housing crisis? Like, you look at the floods that happened at Bantry. Middleton and Bantry have been promised flood defences for about 7 years. Okay, these are life and death occurrences. And yet the planning application for the flood defences for Middle and Bantry are not even delivered as of yet. An incredible situation. It took, I don't know if anybody's from Navan here, but it took 3 years in the 1850s to build a rail line from Navan to Dublin with picks and shovels. And this government is on year 15 of that build, and they haven't even got the rail actually put down yet. So you can see there's a significant issue arising over and over again, a pattern here, and that is there is a responsibility of the government to be able to deliver public infrastructure. Fine Gael have failed beyond any shadow of a doubt, and that's one of the reasons why I think that they should go. In terms of public services, health is one of the most important. Believe it or not, there were 107,000 adverse incidents in the health service last year. Now, an adverse incident is an accident that happens in the health service that results in a negative outcome for the patient. So 107,000 people in our hospitals last year suffered an adverse incident. 500 people died in our hospitals last year because of an adverse incident. When Simon Harris was the Minister for Health, he commissioned a report which cost 1.6 million euros, which actually found that if you don't have enough staff in a ward, you'll probably have more accidents. Now, any one of you could have told him that for a fiver, and yet we are here at the moment and we don't have enough staff on our hospital wards. And that is a very serious issue, because if you look at the heartbreaking crisis that is creating for people, Aoife Johnston, a 16-year-old girl, she presents with sepsis at the A&E in Limerick University. It takes 15 hours for her to receive the antibiotics she needs to deal with that sepsis. And that would have been a life-changing element in her life. It most likely would have saved her life. And the judge that carried out the investigation of it said that the conditions exist today in Limerick University Hospital for exactly the same thing. And Aoife's case wasn't a once-off. 2 years previous, a man was found dead on the floor of the A&E in Limerick University Hospital. They tried to resuscitate him. They couldn't, because rigor mortis had set in. Now, that rigor mortis has set in on a person who has died on the floor of an A&E in a first world country like Ireland is an absolute disgrace. It is a shocking situation. And, you know, I asked senior civil servants, has anybody ever lost their job? Has anybody ever been moved sideways? Has anybody had an income reduction because of any of these 107,000 adverse incidents in the hospital service in his whole experience? And he said no, he's never witnessed that. And that is one of the big problems that exists in Fine Gael. Fine Gael is an accountability-free zone. There's no cost to anybody ever in terms of the Children's Hospital, in terms of the Gucci bike shed, in terms of any of these things. And there's no cost, there's no catalyst for change. Because we know that if you're working in a private sector or in a normal job, if you did something that stuffed up, that messed up, that cost massively, there would be some kind of discipline. There would be help as well in terms of maybe helping you learn in your job or helping you progress or educating you. But after a time, there would be a cost, up to and including losing your job. That never happens at senior elements of the public service. It never happens at senior elements of the civil service, and it certainly never happens in governments as well. I'll give you another example. The cyber attack that happened in 2021, it cost us 100 million euros, okay? It's going to top out at about 650 million euros. Thousands of people had their health delayed as a result. We don't know how many people died as a result of that. Now, at the time, we had the National Cybersecurity Centre, which didn't have a home and it didn't have a CEO. It had a budget of 5 million euros. And to put that in context, the Department of the Taoisigh spent 15 million euros that year on press statements. The National Cybersecurity Centre, tasked with defending Ireland in terms of these types of attacks, had a budget a third of the press office of the one department in government. And I'll tell you, if you ever want to judge where the priorities lie in terms of any government, you judge it on the basis of the finances that they're pouring into those particular areas as well. Cervical check. Leo Varadkar stood up in the Dáil and he apologised to the women who had suffered so significantly as a result of the damage caused by the cervical check scandal. And he promised that no woman would ever have to present to a court to achieve justice in this country. 450 women have had to since go to court to achieve justice. And the government have been fighting many of those women right up until the day that they have died. Right up until the day that some of those women have died, the government have fought those women, which is an absolutely shocking situation. Let me have a minute left. I've spoken about a number of things there, but I also want to speak about where Fine Gael is in terms of society as well. So I believe, unfortunately, currently, first of all, I will say it's not all dark in relation to Fine Gael. There have been successes in relation to Fine Gael, and there are good people within Fine Gael. But I believe that the issues that I've discussed here are damning enough to mean that this government should actually go. I'll also say, though, that Fine Gael have become institutionalised in terms of society. They're living in a bubble, and I'll give you a quick infrastructure of a bubble. We had 2 referendums at the start of this year. Referendums that nobody actually asked for, that no minister actually understood, and that were actually pushed amongst the people. I asked a person in Fine Gael, why did you support that referendum? And they said, well, the NGOs supported the referendum. And I listened and I said, well, the NGOs were told by Roger O'Gorman that they had to support it or they'd lose potentially their funding in future. There's a bubble in Leinster House. Fine Gael is at the heart of that bubble. I believe one of our jobs in Aontú is to pierce that bubble and to make sure that there's a proper connection between the people of Ireland and the politicians that rule them at the moment. Sinead, that's the time up, is it? Yeah. Gur míle maith agaibh go léir.
Thank you very much to Deputy Tóibín for that. Some new guests. Our next speaker shall be Senator Garret Ahearne. Senator Garret Ahearne is based in Tipperary. Senator Ahearne's mother served as a TD for a number of years in the 90s. Senator Ahearne started his political career in local government, having been elected to the Tipperary County Council in 2019, where he served as the Mayor of Clonmel for a year prior to his election to the Seanad in 2020. He has been a strong advocate for policies of rural development and job creation for the youth of Ireland. And with that, I would like to welcome Senator Garret
Ahearne. Thanks very much, Jamie, and thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here. I probably first need to clarify I'm not the Russian agent either. I think if we get all 160 TDs to agree to that and 60 senators, whoever stays quiet is the agent then. Look, I suppose first in the debate, I'll agree with Deputy Tóibín that this is a great country, and regardless of political persuasions or views on what we need to do in the future, or what we've done right or what we've done wrong in the past, we're all in politics for the same reason: to do good for the country, to do good for our community, and to better society. So whether people have different views, we all have the same goal. It's just how do we get there? And I often find very funny, and I see it in Leinster House quite a lot, when people talk about a bubble in Leinster House. It's normally someone in Leinster House says there's a bubble there, but they're not in it themselves. So the only way to look at whether Fine Gael have been a success in government and whether their time is up is to reflect on where we were when we started. And we had a budget last week. And if you look back in 2010, in the budget just before Fine Gael came into government, we had a revenue coming in of 36 billion and we had expenditure of 57 billion. We were in the red of 21 billion. This budget this year, we have revenue coming in of 105 billion, expenditure of 92 billion. If you take that 12 billion and the 14 billion from Apple, we've got a surplus of 26 billion in the space of 13, almost 14 years. If you told anyone back in 2011 that that was possible, no one would believe you. And what that's done is it's given us the opportunity to be able to do things to support communities and to support areas right across the country. So if you look at the budget last week, the 2.4 million that was done in tax measures in USC, in increasing the threshold, one-off payments. There's about 10 one-off payments that are going to be made between now and Christmas. All those are done because of the management of the economy over the last 13 years of Fine Gael in government. And that's why we're able to invest so much in health, we're able to invest so much in record amounts of funding in housing, and that's why we're able to do things to support people who want to get on the housing ladder. Housing's always a topical issue and there's always problems in it, and government and I don't deny that. But what we have put in place is opportunities for people to be able to actually buy houses. Like 500 couples every week now are purchasing houses. And that's because of a scheme we set up, which was a Help to Buy scheme. All opposition are against it. Essentially, it gives you money to be able to purchase a house. And no one has ever answered the question to me, which is that Help to Buy scheme is essentially a deposit. If we don't have that Help to Buy scheme for people to be able to purchase houses, they have to have a deposit, which is 10% of a house. So if you're looking to purchase a house of 300,000, you have to have 30,000 in your bank account to be able to even get a mortgage. And we can't change those rules. Those are central bank rules. But what we have done is we put a scheme in place that gives you 10% of the value of a house through a Help to Buy scheme. So you don't have to save 30,000 euros to be able to get on the housing ladder. I'm from Tipperary. In Tipperary, we have Templemore, which is the main Garda college. When we came into government, that Garda college was closed down. There was cutbacks. We've now reopened it, increased Garda numbers, hoping to get to 15,000, which would be a record amount of Gardaí on the street. That all comes from investment that we've created over the last 13 or 14 years being in government. And then people look at the budget that was produced last week and say, oh, it was a giveaway budget, it's an election budget, we're giving money to everyone. But what they fail to realise as well is we've held back money for a rainy day. We now have 16 billion available to use at whatever point, because it will come at some point where the economy isn't as strong as it is now, where we can use that money to cushion any downturn that comes. That was never there in 2010, 2011 when we came into place. Peadar talks about rural Ireland, and we're both from rural Ireland constituencies. But no one has done more for rural Ireland than Fine Gael. We set up a cabinet department of rural affairs. Almost every village in this country has got money through that, whether it is through CLAR, whether it's through URDF, which is revitalising town centres, town village schemes. When Peadar talks about everyone having to have a job in Dublin, it's just not true. 56% of jobs created across the country are outside of Dublin. We now give opportunities for people to work in towns where I'm from, in Clonmel, well-paid towns. When we came into government, there was no funding there for sports capital grants. Every single club in the country now has got money in the last 3 or 4 rounds of sports capital grants. We've invested in agriculture. We've got rid of milk quotas. Gives opportunities for young farmers to be able to have a viable business going forward. We've made changes to encourage a transfer of land for loads of people in rural Ireland. It's a struggle for young people to get their father or their parents to transfer land to a younger individual. We've done that by setting up partnerships. And one of the biggest things that Fine Gael did in government in the last 13 or 14 years, in my view, and every opposition party was against it, was investing in broadband. We're one of the only countries in the European Union that has broadband going into every single home in the country. And that decision was made before COVID came. And we now see the benefit of remote working and the opportunities to maybe work for a company up in Dublin, but actually be able to work 4 days a week at home or 5 days a week at home if you want. And those are financial decisions we've made. But we've also made social changes while we've been in government. We brought in marriage equality. That wouldn't have been brought in without Fine Gael in government. When we were in government with Labour had it in their manifesto, was brought in by Programme for Government, but it had to be passed by the people. So Labour couldn't pass it on their own. Fine Gael had to convince Fine Gael voters that marriage equality was a good thing. And Fine Gael will be perceived sometimes as a conservative party. But we did it. We put someone as Director of Elections for it, Simon Coveney, who was a family man with young kids, and kind of encourage people who were slightly hesitant about it to say, no, this is a good thing because I trust someone like that who believes in it. We also brought forward the 8th Amendment, a very contentious issue on people on different sides, and we respect that completely. But that was an issue that governments previously, for about 30 years, were avoiding because of the fear of it being politically damaging to them in the next election. But we took those steps to do that because it was right for the country. I often think when you look at a party or you look at a government and judge them how they've performed, you look at crises that were never expected and how did they manage those crises. The last one was the war in Ukraine, and what did we do in terms of that? Because that was obviously unexpected. We've managed to accommodate over 100,000 people in this country in a very, very short period of time. It obviously had an impact on the cost of living. We reduced VAT by 9% for businesses right across the country to support them. We put in electricity payments for people. And there was loads of packages to make sure that our economy remained stable. And now we're in a position where we can say we have the lowest inflation rate in the EU. If you look at COVID as another example, We obviously have a COVID inquiry that's going to happen soon, but we know already that we protected so many jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs right across the country because of PUP payments that were put in place where people were able to get €350 once they were working and they had to take time off work because of COVID. That was done extremely quickly by this government to support people at a time that was very challenging. We already know that we had one of the lowest death rates during COVID in the EU, and that again was because of difficult decisions that were made by a government. And then if you look at the biggest unexpected challenge and totally outside of our control was Brexit. And I think that's one of the best examples you can give of good diplomacy, good leadership. There was years of negotiating with the EU and with Britain, with a very difficult government in Britain who were very difficult to deal with, didn't understand the complexities of Northern Ireland and what that might mean to us. And the real sign of doing a good job is when the opposition actually recognise that the likes of the Minister for Foreign Affairs at the time, Minister Simon Coveney, did a brilliant job. Peadar talks about being out of touch and Fine Gael are out of touch and we don't understand real life. I'll challenge that. If you look at our cabinet ministers, 4 of our cabinet ministers have young families. Simon Harris, Peter Burke, Helen McEntee, Patrick O'Donovan. Everything we're doing at the moment is to try to support young families. If you take a young family with very young kids, what have we done for them? We've increased maternity leave. We've created paternity leave, parents' leave, unpaid leave. Now it's very common where you'll find a partner who'll be able to take off almost a year of work to be able to raise their child. And we did that because we recognise that's the first year of raising a child is hugely important. We've reduced childcare by 50% over the last 3 or 4 years. For most families across the country, that was a second mortgage for people. Now we've made it some way manageable. We have to get more places, of course we do. But have we reduced costs for people? Absolutely. If you look at kids that are going to school, what have we done for families there? With free bus transport for people, with free meals, we have free school books, record number of SNAs, record number of new schools being built and extensions. Like that is huge investment in early education. When you look at college places, there's more college places right across the country. We've reduced fees. We've created a €1,000 rebate on rent for college students. There's new universities being created. There's record job opportunities for students coming out of education. If you're a working family, what have we done? We've increased the minimum wage 9 times since we've been in government. We've increased the threshold before you go from 20% tax to 40% tax up to €44,000 now. We've reduced the USC numerous times, and we've had public sector pay agreements 3 or 4 times during the lifetime of our term in government. So we've made real changes there. In terms of pensioners, we've increased pensioners almost yearly. More pensioners qualify for medical cards, more pensioners qualify for fuel allowance, more one-off payments. And like when we came into government, pensioners were actually marching outside Leinster House because of cuts that were being made. But in my view, there's one thing that we've done and that we can be very proud of Fine Gael in government. We've held the Ministry of Enterprise, Trade and Employment for almost 14 years now since we've been in government. We've never given it to any other political party, whether we were in with Labour, the Independents, Fianna Fáils, the Greens. We've had, I think, 6 ministers in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. We've had Richard Bruton, Heather Humphreys, Mary Mitchell O'Connor, Leo Varadkar, Simon Coveney, Peter Burke. When we came in 2011, we promised 100,000 jobs in 5 years. Absolutely no one believed it at the time. Richard Bruton was going around to petrol stations announcing 1 job here, 2 jobs there. 100,000 jobs in 5 years is what we promised. In 13 and a half years, we've created 950,000 jobs. If we go full term until March, we'll have created over 1 million jobs in this country. We'll have went from 1.8 million to 2.8. By any standards, that's a success. And for people to have a job, it gives them an opportunity to have a good life. And that's where Fine Gael are very proud of their performance in government. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much to Senator Ahearne for that. I would like to welcome our first student speaker of the proposition. He is currently pursuing a Masters in DCU and he is also on the Ard Comhairle for Sinn Féin. Would you all please welcome Daithí Fitzgerald.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, fellow students, Accordia. My name is Daithí Fitzgerald, and today I'm here to speak in favour of the motion that this House believes Fine Gael's time in government is up. After 13 years in power, their tenure has been defined by mismanagement, broken promises, and the erosion of our basic public services. We've got the most expensive hospital in the world. We have a security hut that costs €1.4 million and the Gucci bike shed that cost over €300,000. Do you know, I was nearly expecting something mad in the most recent budget, like a €10,000 paperclip. And I do agree with Deputy Tóibín that it must be squirrels advising Fine Gael. So today I will try to encapsulate Fine Gael's failures in under 7 minutes, a near impossible task considering the time allocated. Fine Gael, supported by Fianna Fáil, have failed to deliver on issues like healthcare, housing, cost of living and public safety. But they're also contributing to a growing sense of despair and frustration across this island. We've seen 3 different taoisigh, 2 from Fine Gael, in this government term. But nothing has really changed for workers and families. But how could it? Simon Harris, the very figure that Fine Gael tries to present as new, has been deeply embedded in all the crises and problems that people face every single day. Now let's not forget, it was Harris's failure as Minister for Health that contributed to the collapse of the government, resulting in a general election. But now we have a new leader of Fine Gael, someone who couldn't even survive a motion of no confidence. Yet Fine Gael's spin would have you believe that he is a new, fresh, energetic TikTok Taoiseach. Fine Gael will argue that this government is successful, that it's delivering. Well, I must live in a very different Ireland from them, because the Ireland that I live in, under Fine Gael in government, the housing crisis has gotten worse. The crisis in our healthcare service has gotten worse, and households continue to struggle every single day. So where do I even begin? Let's start with healthcare. The current state of our healthcare system is nothing short of disastrous. After 5 chaotic years of budget mismanagement, Fine Gael's latest health budget offers nothing but false hope to hundreds of thousands of people awaiting treatment. Emergency departments are in constant crisis. GPs are overwhelmed, and over 800,000 people remain on waiting lists. And our most vulnerable, such as children with scoliosis and spina bifida, are being let down by broken promises. In 2017, then Minister Simon Harris promised to end the delay for these children. He failed. And these are not just numbers on waiting lists. It's about real human suffering, families in distress, and the lives put on hold due to a system that Fine Gael have proven incapable of fixing. Despite being awash with resources, Fine Gael presided over scandal after scandal. And instead of delivering solutions, they waste public money, money hard earned by taxpayers who deserve better. Now, let's turn to housing. Housing is perhaps the most glaring failure of Fine Gael's time in government. Over the last 4 years, the price of a new home here in Dublin has skyrocketed by €100,000. Average rents are nearing €2,000 per month, and a record number of people are homeless. 4,401 of those are children. Remember that number. The government seems to think that €500,000 is the price of an affordable home. Tell that to our nurses. Tell that to our teachers. Tell that to our factory workers and our young families who are either living in their childhood bedroom or are being forced to emigrate. And what is Fine Gael's response to this crisis? More sweetheart deals with vulture funds and tax breaks for the wealthiest. And Fine Gael talk about fairness. But they've shown time and time again that their priorities are not with the ordinary Irish worker. It is not you and me, the young people of this generation, who are struggling to get by, but it is those who can pay the most. Their failure to address the soaring childcare costs and the inadequate pay for early years educators is a clear sign of where their loyalties lie. While parents struggle with extortionate fees, Fine Gael offers soundbites, not solutions. But the reality is that public services are collapsing under Fine Gael's watch. They promised a universal healthcare system. We're still waiting. They promised affordable housing. They handed the market over to vulture funds. And now, when workers and family need their support the most, they only offer rhetoric. This is not a government that works for the people. And in terms of justice and safety, Senator Ahearne, Fine Gael's track record is abysmal. After nearly 14 years in charge of the justice system, Garda numbers have dropped, community policing has been slashed, and local Garda stations are closing. The reality is people do not feel safe walking on the streets, and Fine Gael's policies have done nothing to address this. And finally, let's talk about us, students and young people. Fine Gael has consistently failed to support the future generation. The Union of Students in Ireland have even come out and outlined the failures of this Fine Gael government after the budget, stating that education costs continue to rise, student accommodation remains scarce, and young people are left with little to no hope for their future. And instead of ensuring affordable education and meaningful job opportunities, they are offering young people a plane ticket out of this country. So let's call time on this government. Let's not be fooled by their spin, by their sound bites, or their empty promises. The truth is that Fine Gael has had its chance. It's had 13 years of opportunities to deliver on housing, to deliver on healthcare, and to deliver on public services. And they've failed. And it's time for change. It's time to put workers, families, young people, and our communities first. And the upcoming general election offers us that choice. More of the same, or a fresh start. We can either allow Fine Gael to continue squandering our resources and failing our people, or we can choose a new path. One that prioritises affordable homes. One that prioritises accessible healthcare and real investment into our communities. And it's time to build an Ireland where our young people aren't forced to leave for a better life. Fine Gael's time in government is up. It's time for them to stand aside. I urge you to support this motion. Gormila Magat.
Thank you very much to Daithí for that. Our next student speaker comes from the opposition side. He's a former chair of YFG's branch here on DCU. He's a former vice chair of this very society, and he is now a strategist for Meath East's Fine Gael branch. So with that, would you welcome Cormac Docherty?
That was a heavy speech. I feel like I learned a lot there. I love to learn things. I feel like I learned so much in the last week. Don't get parking in DCU after 12. The best coffee in Londis is from the coffee machine second from the left. Do not try to do an American accent to an American. I also learned how to read graphs. Here's one of every poll since May. You'll notice Fine Gael is in the lead in every single one. Here's another graph that shows Fine Gael gaining support and the opposition parties losing support. Now that my speech is done, I can go on the 6 minutes of waffle you chose to give up your evening for. In politics, we are often accused of hating our opponents, but I do not hate these misguided men before me. But I do worry, and I am happy they have gone before me, because they have given a demonstration of what they are and what they are capable of. Their arrogance, their capacity for destruction, not just of our economy, but of our culture, art, and history itself, all to appease the so-called mob who scream, change. I'd like to begin by urging you all to look once more at the motion. It's "This House believes that Fine Gael's time in government is up." They're giving reasons why Fine Gael's time in government should be up. But I, a humble man, leave that to the Irish people to decide. The argument you often hear in the opposition and the media is that Fine Gael has been in government too long. Too long. As if the levers of power are something every career narcissist politician has the right to have a go of. Teacher, Simon's been playing with it for so long. When do I get a go? There are 3-year-olds I would trust at the wheel of a car more than some opposition figures in government. They argue the idea that longevity is a vice instead of a virtue is absurd. The OVP in Austria, Fine Gael's sister party, has been in government 64 of the last 80 years. In Japan, the Liberal Democrats, 75 of the last 79 years. Of the 76 Fine Gael TDs elected in 2011, only 6 are running in the next election. We have allowed ourselves to grow and change over time. Daithí and Deputy Tóibín are effectively saying we've done nothing for anybody. But when we increased the national minimum wage to €13.50 an hour, that was the highest it's ever been. The highest ever. And it is 10% more than anyone else had in their manifesto at the last election. 275,000 people have benefited from that. Some of you might say the winter fuel allowance is not enough, but it's €1,348 people get that Sinn Féin couldn't even be bothered to mention in their manifesto. When leftist governments across the ocean are cutting welfare, we are expanding and increasing its eligibility. When they say we've done nothing for families in this country, childcare supports have risen to the highest level ever, accompanied by free books, cheap transport, and hot school meals. It's money that would never have gone in under a failing left-wing economy. If you say we've done nothing to address the housing crisis, ask the families who have benefited from the Help to Buy scheme. More first-time buyers are buying homes each week than ever before. 420 new houses are being built every single day, double what it was last year. And at this rate is expected to pick up should Fine Gael continue in government. That would never be seen under Sinn Féin. They're in government in Northern Ireland. The rate of homelessness is 8 times higher, and hospital waiting lists are twice as long per capita. Peadar and Daithí want to make out that the people want change, and Fine Gael is deeply unpopular. Peadar brought up the referenda from March. I'd like to make 3 key points there. The people voted against change. That was a Green Party initiative, and Peadar is no stranger to losing referenda himself. The people have supported Fine Gael in poll after poll. Simon Harris has an approval rating of 55%, miles ahead of anyone else. That is not for any little reason. And why shouldn't that be the case? All one has to do is look at the amazing opposition that we have. Sinn Féin, where to start? The party of bombers like Desi Ellis TD, gangsters like Councillor Jonathan Dowdall, and a string of sexual abuse and paedophilia, including Martin Morris, Liam Adams, yes, that Adams, and just last week, Michael McGonigal, the latter of which they referred to a children's charity after being aware he was being investigated for paedophilia. Are these the people you want running your country? What about the Labour Party? A relic. The Social Democrats, hypocrites who put partisan success before national success, purple Labourites who couldn't handle the stress of government and have also had child sexual abuse problems. The Green Party, you won't find a bigger environmentalist than me here, but the Green Party don't seem to care about climate anymore. They elected a leader who said the Green Party should focus on something other than environmental issues. People before profit, champagne socialists to the core. My family didn't spend generations crawling out of poverty for them to drag us back in. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote, "Evil is not able to create anything new. It can only distort and destroy what has been invented and made by the forces of good." Very similar to the opposition in that respect. The only time you should look into your neighbour's bowl is to see if they have enough to eat. They just want to rob Peter to pay Paul. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I have agreed 100% with everything Fine Gael have done and said in government. I'm not going to lie and pretend they've gotten every call right. If you find yourself not critiquing a political party at all, you're not in a party, you're in a cult. But I do believe the presence of Fine Gael in government has been and continues to be the best option for the people of this country. There are many of you here tonight who have said, I've never agreed with Simon Harris once. But when all is said and all is done, Fine Gael have beliefs, the opposition have none. A vote for the motion is a vote for a government without Fine Gael, a Sinn Féin government. I'm not saying anything is going to be perfect, but surely the opposition and the alternatives aren't any better. Oppose the motion, oppose Sinn Féin, oppose bad judgment, and for God's sake, oppose paedophilia. It shouldn't be that hard.
Okay. Thank you very much to Cormac for that wonderfully illustrative speech. With that, I would like to welcome our final speaker from the proposition for the night. He is the Vice Chair of our society. Would you all please welcome John Brosnan.
Now, I would like to start off by saying something I never, ever thought that I would say, which is that I agree with Cormac Docherty. If you never, ever criticise a political party, you are not in a political party, you are in a cult. Cult. Great start. And I would like to make clear that just because I'm criticising Fine Gael, I do not endorse any Irish political party. And as the opposition have elaborated quite well, there are some aspects in which the Irish economy is doing well. Our GDP is per capita is one of the highest in the world. We are a major player on the world stage, particularly in tech and pharmaceutical industries, and they did a great job of elaborating our sizable budget surplus. However, if when assessing Ireland you look at the people and the planet over the economy, things look differently, and they look far, far worse. There are three main reasons why I believe Fine Gael's time in government is and should be up. Those three reasons are the housing crisis, the healthcare system, and the response to the climate catastrophe. And first of all, the housing crisis, which has been well discussed and well elaborated today. Its roots can be traced back to the state withdrawing from the building of social homes, as well as the 2008 financial disaster, which caused a huge deficit of building homes. Fine Gael, yes, they have enacted a huge house building project. The most recent numbers that I saw were around 30,000 homes a year. However, most experts agree that is nowhere near enough. Most experts agree that the figure is 40,000, and the central bank recently released a statement outlining that the proper figure is closer to 52,000 homes a year. 30,000 is simply not enough. It will not help the 10,000 people who are homeless in this country. Fine Gael should not be praised for not fixing a mess that they created. They did not build any homes for 5 years. They've been in government for 13 years and overseen years of little to no house building before it picked up in around 2017. And the measures that Fine Gael have enacted to help those locked out of housing have been, to put it mildly, insufficient. Measures like HAP or the Help to Buy scheme have had minimal benefits for renters or those looking to buy homes. I would like to focus on HAP for a moment. It has been criticised as insufficient because the limits are oftentimes at the start too low for tenants to find any affordable accommodation. Furthermore, in the long term, as the rent rises, the tenants are going to find themselves worse and worse off. This is combined with the fact that the limits were not raised from 2017 to 2022. That is a 5-year period when rents were surging. So if HAP isn't great for tenants, then who is it great for? It is great for landlords. They see their income subsidised and guaranteed by local authorities. And that, my friends, is no accident. Fine Gael know who their base is. They know who they represent. It is not those who they love to say who get up early and work hard. It is not the homeless. It is not young people. Their property, their base, their voters are those who already own property, those who have a financial interest in maintaining the current housing crisis. Any measure Fine Gael introduce, such as HAP, such as Help to Buy, will not address the root issue, which is a lack of supply and that the house prices are too high relative to people's incomes. That is an issue because property owners will need to see some curtailment, some imposition on the very good deal they've been having to see a more fair and affordable housing crisis. The imposition will be mild, they will be okay. One thing which has been established is that those who own houses are not the ones most vulnerable in the state. They are not the ones who need help. Fine Gael will not do this, however. They will not take substantive measures which could potentially abate or solve the housing crisis. This is because they know who they depend on and they will defend their interests above all else. The best example I can give is Leo Varadkar a few years ago saying, one person's rent is another person's income. He's not factually incorrect, but that statement is a clear indication of where his and his party's allegiances lie. Next, I'd like to look at the environment. The opposition have elaborated. We have a rainy day fund, a sizable rainy day fund. I am curious, did everyone else see the fact that we are literally flooding in the last week? Ireland is lagging well behind our legally obligated goals. We are on track to miss our 2030 climate goals by a wide margin. Not only is that going to fine us millions of euros by the EU because we contractually agreed to keep those obligations, it is not going to do nearly enough to prevent the near certain climate catastrophe that a lot of scientists have elaborated is coming. It is a certainty. Fine Gael have acknowledged, yes, it is an issue, but no, we're not going to do anything substantial to change it. We are on track to see a 30% reduction in emissions, but our goals is 50%, and we have just 5 years to do it. If there is a rainy day, I would argue that time is now. We are on the verge of a real environmental collapse of humanity, of the home of humanity, of the planet becoming uninhabitable for a majority of people. In response, however, Fine Gael has responded with its trademark passing of the buck and insufficient pace. And it is especially unacceptable when you see how well placed Ireland is to deal with the crisis. As Labour, we have huge financial resources available to combat this issue, but Fine Gael either don't have the political will or the ability to solve it. Either way, the result will be the same. And finally, healthcare, which again has been elaborated. There have been Ireland's healthcare system is awful. We spend some of the most in the OECD, and despite that high spending, we see some of the worst results. We are the worst country in the EU for accessing mental health services, and as elaborated, our trolley wait times are terrible. Aoife Johnston died in 2022 after waiting 13 hours for medical treatment. And this is not an isolated incident. As elaborated, there have been lots of preventable deaths, and I'm sure if I went around here and asked people in the room, many people would have horror stories of waiting hours on emergency rooms or in trolleys, or waiting months for non-emergency procedures. Me personally, in 2019, I had to wait 9 hours to be given some pain medication, a sling and an x-ray. All of that treatment together took 20 minutes, and I had to wait 9 hours. And I am one of the lucky ones here. As elaborated, Aoife Johnston died. And who could have foreseen it? Certainly not Fine Gael, when they were in power for 11 years, and did not think to add any capacity to Limerick Hospital when all the regional hospitals around Limerick were closed as part of austerity. That led to an increase in demand for Limerick Hospital in an area with a rising and an ageing population. They did not think, maybe a health system already struggling should need more support, more capacity, with more demand. This was even as staff were sounding the alarm for years. The inquest found the death was avoidable, and there were years of reports outlining that deaths like these are waiting to happen. And that was not a one-off incident. As elaborated, there have been hundreds of deaths that have been seen as preventable. It took a death of a child for Fine Gael to start to promise the things that they should have been doing for years. Fine Gael, after entering power in 2011, they decided to save the economy. They decided two recoveries. To save the economy, they sacrificed the people. They sacrificed us to unaffordable housing, environmental collapse, and unattainable health services, despite our many incredibly talented and hard-working medical professionals. As a country, we deserve better. It's time we acknowledge that fact and we vote Fine Gael out. And we forget my comment at the start. Thank you.
Thank you very much to John for that. We will now have our final speech of the night from the recently elected chair of Young Fine Gael on this campus. Would you all please welcome Brendan Collins.
Good evening, lads. Jesus. Jonathan, that was a really good speech. So, let's start. Chairman, also adjudicator, members of the opposition and proposition, and the lovely audience. As the last speaker for the opposition, I'd like to thank my esteemed team members for the points they've brought forward here this evening. I'm Brendan Collins. I'm doing EPL. And I was recently elected the co-chair of YFG Society, along with my counterpart, Laura, who's in the back. It's come to my attention that we don't have many members in DCU, in YFG Society. But Fine Gael as a whole leads the polls, as kindly illustrated by Cormac. To me, that shows to us that the younger people of Ireland, or at least in DCU, don't warm to Fine Gael. There may be members of Ógra Fianna Fáil here, and I would believe that they do have more members than us. I'm not trying to highlight Fine Gael's struggle to connect with the younger generation, but more so its popularity with those whom are older in Ireland. This leads me to say, If there isn't a true representation of the real Fine Gael sport in this House, how may this be a fair debate? You may argue that it is a result of younger people's decision whether or not to support that party. I don't deny that, but I'd like just to highlight it. To those whom which support said party are under fire here. The thread I'm trying to sow into something greater here is that Fine Gael's popularity with the older generation is not to be ignored. This House believes our time is up, but do the older generation. The famous American journalist Norman Cousins said in 1994, "History is a vast early warning system." History serves as a record of human behaviour and decision making, revealing both successes and failures. The opposition have highlighted the failures, and I believe Cormac here definitely highlighted the successes. When leaders or societies fail to heed the conflicts, when leaders of societies fail to heed the conflicts or nationalistic fever, economic recessions can follow predictable cycles if certain warning signs are ignored. In this sense, history becomes a guide showing us how previous generations faced challenges and what the consequences of their actions were. This leads me to ask, do the older generation vote for Fine Gael for they have seen the troubles other elected parties have caused in the past? Do those which hold more responsibility than you or I vote for Fine Gael for a reason? I don't think they vote for Fine Gael for no reason. I'll just leave that with you. I'm not one to judge the wrongdoings nor the mishaps occurred by parties in the power of the past. However, I do concern myself with the repeat of wrongdoings. My teammates have previously highlighted the great provisions, policies and good work done by the party in the past. I see how that helps the debate to swing the judgment. But does it change this House's belief? I'm not so sure. As I'm in the process of closing this debate, I know I'm responsible to highlight the collisions of argument between the proposition and my team. To refer back to history, Mr. Tóibín, the leader of Ain 2, is with us here tonight. To continue my theme of history, the party Ain 2 was founded by Mr. Tóibín, a TD. He resigned from Sinn Féin on November 15, 2018, due to his anti-abortion views. The name Ain 2 was announced at a meeting in Belfast on the 28th of January. Ain 2, I believe, to mean Oscrailga, to be unity, togetherness as one. However, Ain 2, a party which leans to Irish republicanism, and one could say quite conservative. But who am I to judge? I'm a member of a centre-right party, which on the most part is somewhat conservative. But is the party unified with the select view which its members hold, or the view of the greater public? Its motto on its website is, "The only party listening to the people." Listening to the people, Mr. Tóibín. I'd argue your stance on abortion seems to hinder that message, don't you think? A question for the audience and the adjudicator. How can Mr. Tóibín here have much of an impact on the debate if his career is off the back of consistent opposition to Fine Gael? Surely that is his one true focus, to oppose. So why not join the opposition, Mr. Tóibín? You'd make a great team player. To refer to Locke's political theory, which I only had actually this morning, he said, it seems to be a coincidence, sometimes people disagree with how their taxes are used. For example, the magnet phone pouches, boycotts, etc. But universal political obligation, which a fine politician like Mr. Tóibín here should stand for, means that everyone within the state's borders is generally required to follow its laws. Of course, he follows this theory. It was supported in Northern Ireland, and Sinn Féin, his sister party, supported it as well. I'd like to break down a quote from the Ain 2 website for those of you which weren't analysing it just before this debate. Ain 2 will end the broken political culture of the finger-in-the-wind politics of the establishment. If this is true, can anybody here tell me what Ain 2 have changed in regards to the establishment? What does this mean, finger-in-the-wind politics, may I quote? Did you write that yourself, Mr. Tóibín? Ain 2 will empower elected representatives to stand out and speak for what they believe, and by doing so, really change the establishment. We will break the groupthink within the media and political establishment that silences and stillifies political debate in Ireland. Very topical. Aontú will stand up without fear for you. Without fear. Who stands up? The 3 elected officials or something like that? And what protests against how he also agrees with Sinn Féin on Irish republicanism and united economies with the North. And really, we are the party which was formed over a disagreement in regard to the right to life. I mean, come on. It's a bit rich coming here to tell us that Fine Gael's time is up when your party contributes to little representation across the country. What say have you? I mean, you're a leader, great. But with the same amount of TVs in the Dáil as the same amount of people on my 5-a-side soccer team, it's kind of crazy. I won't lie, I am jealous of you, however. You get paid to oppose and be the sister party for Sinn Féin. Thank you very much.
That marks the end of our speeches. There will now be a 5-minute break in which you can go to the toilet, get a glass of water, whatever, and when you return, we'll have the Q&A. Thank you very much to all our speakers.